Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
Well, folks, welcome back to Gale Force Wins. My name is Gerry Carew, and I'm very excited about our guest today. I found out about this guest from my son, who is in Enactus at Memorial University. Enactus is an entrepreneurial after-class group that get together and think about business ideas. And our guest showed up as a guest speaker and is giving back to the community. So enough about me telling that. I'm going to get John to introduce himself. John, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Gerry. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here with you. John Maddigan, and moved back to Canada in 2021 after spending 30 years in the U.S., first getting a graduate degree, and then moving on to veterinary medicine in Portland, Oregon, and in the Oregon area in general. And did that with my wife for 27 years. We were lucky, everything seemed to fall our way. And after 27 years, we retired, decided to come back to Canada, and came back and thought that we want to make a difference in the communities we live in. And share some of our insights, because after 30 years in the States, 27 as an entrepreneur, you gain a certain number of insights into business, and I would love to share those with other small and large businesses in Canada, because the U.S. is a very competitive market. You'll learn a lot, and I think Canadian businesses can learn from what we've learned down there, because you'll learn hard lessons in a very competitive business market.
Well, thanks for that introduction. And folks, I had lunch with John a couple of weeks ago, and it was fascinating. And I think you're going to be on a very interesting journey. I'm going to back it up and go way back, not too far back, but you grew up in Montreal, was it?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, and we're gonna weave a journey here now to see how you became so successful in the United States.
Both my parents are Newfoundlanders, and they moved to Montreal after they got married, and I was born in Montreal, 4 young sisters, and we lived in the suburb of Montreal, West Island, called a little small community called Pancourt, and had it's an amazing childhood. I had a best friend that was, and is still my best friend today, 65 years later. We played road hockey every day, and we had a fantastic upbringing. You knew everybody in the community, because it was a very small community, and was very competitive in sports, played sports all my life, and learned a lot of lessons, learned about team, about leadership, about taking care of the team, and those lifelong lessons stuck with me to this very day. And the lessons you learn from competitive sports, I think, is something that helps form your character, and you stick with it. Did that, went to high school there, and after high school moved to Ottawa, went to Carleton University, got an economics degree there, and like so many Eastern Canadians, went out to the oil patch. And
let me stop for a second. Yeah. So a Montreal boy who goes to Carleton, not McGill or...
Well, because we live so far out of Montreal in the West Island, it was to commute to McGill every day on a bus was about 2 hours, and on a train I'd have to first get from my house to the train station, which was in St. Anne's, which was, 5-mile walk type of thing. So the commute was just difficult to get there, and then you're on a train for an hour and a half, because it stopped. It was the whistle stop. It stopped everywhere, and I thought, well, going to a smaller community like Ottawa at the time. Ottawa was 300,000 people. Montreal was 2 million.
Yeah.
And you could live, close to the school, get on a bus, you're there in 30 minutes. So it was just the convenience of that, and I guess like everybody else, you're 17, 18 years old, you want to get away from home.
Yeah.
And I felt that I was prepared to do that, and my parents had given me a lot of leeway, because my best friend was 2 years older than I. So, when I was 12 years old, we were going to Expo 67, and we'd leave in the morning at 9 o'clock, and we'd go home at 10 o'clock at night. My mother never worried. Oh, you're with Ronnie. You're good.
Yeah.
So a lot of independence.
I am stopping you again.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to what you said about your mom and dad. Your mom and dad grew up in Newfoundland, in St. John's, or what part of Newfoundland did they grow up in?
Mom was Bonavista Bay, Sweet Bay, to be precise, and Dad was born on Leslie Street in St. John's.
Interesting. Yeah, yep. Leslie. I know Leslie well.
Yep.
Very steep street.
Very steep street.
Must have been interesting in the winter when he.
Oh man, yeah.
So did they speak French or?
Did not. No. On the West Island of Montreal, it's all Anglophones. Mm-hmm. So from Dorval all the way to where we lived in Pancourt, predominantly Anglophones.
Interesting.
And there had to be, even back then, Montreal population was 2 million, and 500,000 people lived in the West Island, and we're all Anglophones. So we could cope. I learned French, because playing, particularly on the hockey team, we had French Canadian kids on the team, and we used to, travel. And one of the times we were traveling to the States, and Norm Beauchemin. They said, you stay with John because John can speak better French than anybody. So we were at a game, and I played a physical brand of hockey, and we were playing the Troy Albany All-Stars. And first game, we were watching this kids warm up, and there was this one kid, and he had a tremendous slap shot. I thought, holy Moses! I was center, and I thought, I'm going to take care of that guy the first shift I'm on the ice, because he can't he's got a cannon, and I'm going to take care of that right away. So probably the third shift of the game, he's on the ice, I'm on the ice, and the puck rarely went into our end, but it did this time, and the puck went around the boards, and it came out to him. So I just, got on my horses and just annihilated him as he had his head down, taking a shot. So long story short, they carted him off the ice, and you stay with a billet. So we're getting there. You don't know who you're going to stay with, so you stay with some family, and the parents, asked me and Norm, who was that kid on your team that was so rough out there? I mean, he heard our Nicky, who was their son.
Oh, no.
And I said nothing. And in Norm's very bad English, he said, it was him. And I looked at Norm and said, thanks, Norm. And they were so upset with me, because I had to take him to the hospital, that they didn't feed me breakfast in the morning. So,
that's a funny story, John.
It was an interesting trip. So, but you learn, camaraderie and team players, and so that those guys were good friends, and I enjoyed it so much. But I realized that at a young age, although I was playing AA hockey, at 14 I moved up to AAA, and that hockey was my passion. But I realized at 14, I'm not good enough, So
AAA,
because two of the kids on the team, a couple of the kids, Peter Marsh was only 13, star of the league, and went on to the NHL. Eddie DeMallo, only 13, star in the league. Went on, got a scholarship in the U.S. and probably would have made it if he hadn't had concussions. So two outstanding hockey players, and I was going no, not me.
Yeah, that's it. I want to go back to your mom and dad. So, a lot of Newfoundlanders went to Toronto. It's a little easier.
Yes.
Anglophone. And to leave Leslie Street and Bonavista Bay and go to Montreal, that is a huge cultural upheaval for the two of them. They must have been very adventurous people.
Well, I just think they were, I know that my mother had grit. I mean, she had grit. Dad was quieter, more soft-spoken, but Mom, was a Bay girl, and it was that intestinal fortitude that she had. She absolutely gave to me, and that grit, and that's what she had. And her attitude was always, go out and get it, go get it. Don't let it come to you. You go get it. And they were just determined to, have a better life. And, they're probably back in, that was back in 1953, 54, probably not a lot of opportunities in Newfoundland at the time, and Dad caught on with Air Canada at the time, and moved out to Montreal, and they settled there. But there was a lot of Newfoundlanders in Montreal even then. One of our one of his friends, Bill Cochran, was also from Newfoundland, and they lived in the same community. So there was somebody started and blazed that trail, and they've followed behind. A friend of theirs said, "Hey, come on out." So they came out, instantly had friends, and went from there.
So you had a very, your mom had grit. That certainly is a good foundation.
Oh, I tell you, that has served me well for my entire life, and it's her. I mean, but it's like another funny story. You think, your parents have grit, but I can remember my mother never used to watch me play hockey, and I basically asked her, don't watch me play, because I'm not the kind of son that you're going to be happy with. I was just very competitive. I mean, from like age 5, and so one day it was bitterly cold, and this was when you played outside when you were really young, and so it was an outdoor game, and it was a fair walk from the house. And she said, "Well, I'll drive you this time." I said, "No, it's okay, it's okay." But it was 30 below. She said, "No, I'm going to drive you." I said, I've got time today. So Dad was off, so she drove me to the rink, and we played our game. And after the game, we got in the car, and she said, "Who was that boy out there that was so rough with those other kids? I mean, you heard that other boy, and he got into 2 fights, and I was screaming at him the whole game." And I said, "Mom, that was me." And she goes, "What?" I said, "You didn't recognize me?" But you've got you got your all your gear on, your helmet on, you got your toque on, and she had never seen me play, so she didn't even know who the 2 teams were. But I said to her, I looked at her then, and I think I was maybe 9, and I said, "Mom, I don't think you should go to any more of my hockey games." And she says, "I don't think I should either." So, but that was the grit that she gave me. It was just that sheer will to win and the determination. And so it's like, you can't just blame me.
Yeah.
I got that from you.
Well, that's great. You know what? I love hockey, and I played last night. I'm usually defense. They put me up forward. I scored 2 goals and got an assist in a 9-8 loss.
Yeah.
but I'm really happy. Anytime anyone knows me, anyone watching this who played hockey with me, I don't score many goals. Yeah. 2 goals and an assist in one night. It's
a good night.
I feel like a teenager again.
Yeah.
But anyway. So Carleton University, you graduate, and let's go from there. What did you graduate with from Carleton?
BCom in economics.
Yeah.
And Bachelor of Economics, a BA in economics, and then got job offers in the government, because you're in Ottawa. The bank, I think one of the banks had a job offer there, and I thought, I want to be a little more adventurous, and so I thought off to Calgary. Had a sister that was there, so I had a place to stay before I got settled, which is always helpful, and then got into the oil and gas industry, and enjoyed it, and had a mentor there, and extremely helpful. I mean, I'm going to talk about that a little later, about the importance of mentoring. But back in the day when I was there, we had mainframe computers, so all of the data that these oil and gas companies had were in these massive binders that were 17 by 14 inch paper.
The magnetic reels? Is that what you had on?
Back then. Yeah, nobody had PCs.
Yeah.
So, if you had to find information, and I was in a group, special projects group, and we were working on enhanced oil recovery. They called it fracking, and we called it enhanced oil recovery back then. And we were just trying to figure out the value of C3 pluses, propane, butane, pentane, to re-inject into the underneath the oil to dry the oil up to get more money. And there was a great number of tax incentives, but you had to figure out, how much production was there, how much production did we get as a result of this, how much was the value of the product that we re-injected. And for someone like me, you would never have been able to navigate all of this data, because back then it was just data. It wasn't information. It was just so much in so many disparate places. And he was, Ray had been there for 30 years by the time I had gotten there. So he knew every well, every location, and was just helped me, navigate this, because I was putting this package together to submit to the government. And I was the second guy at Texaco, Canada, to get a PC. There was one in engineering and one on my desk.
Wow.
And the only reason we had it is because, I'm dating myself, this is before Excel, we had a program called VisiCal.
I remember it.
And, and that's where everything was DOS based. And, you put in, all of these formulas. But, the spreadsheet that I had was, would have filled your entire wall. So you just couldn't do it manually, because if you had to change something, you had like 500 different, calculations to redo. Whereas with VisiCalc, that data has been revised. Well, you hit one number and then it just, rolls through the spreadsheet. Took some time back then. It was not like today when you hit it and you get an instant result. So so having him help me with that, because he, nobody was computer literate back then. You had to learn, because that was the very first PC back in 1982, 83. And he said, I'm too old to learn that. But he says, yeah, I'll help you find the data. You write the formulas, put them in. And so he was just, incredibly helpful and helped me navigate my way through Texaco.
It's amazing, though, isn't it? How, I know you want to talk about mentors later, but you're right. When I think about my very first sales manager, I was lucky enough to get a guy that was incredibly nurturing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if he was just frankly an arsehole, I probably wouldn't have learned as much. Now, you can learn from an arsehole too, but
it's harder.
Yeah.
And the good thing about Ray was, Ray was, at the twilight of his career. So he didn't fear that, sharing information with me would have any impact negatively on his career path. Yeah. So, those people are so invaluable, and, you treasure them, because it helped me enormously.
Well, it's funny about that. Even if you're not at the end of your career, if you meet someone who knows the job, they're not afraid of hiring someone smarter than them, are they?
They're not. They're not. And those are the people that corporations love, because they can transfer so much, institutional knowledge in a very short period of time that would take you almost forever to learn.
Yeah.
So it just accelerates the learning curve. And that's just so invaluable to businesses.
So you're in the oil industry. You're lucky enough to have one of the world's first PCs, probably. How many PCs are on the go in 1982? There might be 1,000, maybe.
Yeah, two in all of Texaco.
So you spent time there, and then where did you go from the oil industry?
After the oil industry, I was working sort of in sort of the nexus between private and public, because the stuff that I was working on, we were looking to get subsidies from the government. We valued the amount of product that we re-injected into the subsurface, and the government gave us back a rebate on the estimated value of that product. And we were doing this for the very first time back then, because it was brand new. And I was fascinated by that, because I can remember one time my boss said to me, can we do the next project? And I said, well, sure we can. And he said, how are you so sure of that? And I said, well, I play hockey with the head auditor for the government of Alberta. So, we're friends. And he said, I asked him one time, and he says, oh yeah, you got to go. You're going to go. So, I had, inside information, which was helpful. But I wanted to learn how government thought, what was their motivation? Well, how do they make decisions? So I decided to quit Texaco, go back to Carleton University, and start my graduate degree in public administration. And the whole idea was to learn how government thought, and what was their thought process, and what motivated them.
That must have been easy, because you had a pretty good job. The oil industry is where everyone wanted to be, best paying jobs in Canada, and you left that.
Yeah, because I thought that I needed to improve my skill set. I think I had an undergraduate degree. I was a good student, but I thought that I wanted to be better, and I wanted to go higher up in that corporation. And I thought that a master's degree would be helpful, and an understanding of how government worked, because I was going to take that. I had no intention of working in government. I wanted to go back to the private sector, but I wasn't working. I wasn't at Carleton for 3 or 4 months, I guess. And a friend of mine, I was working part-time at a restaurant, and one of my friends that worked at the restaurant with me said, hey, my mom's looking for someone to hire. At External Affairs, they're working on the Canada-U.S. free trade agreement. Do you have an interest? And I said, absolutely. So finished my first course at Carleton, then went off to external affairs, and ended up working in what they call the Free Trade Operations Group. And a good friend of mine then, David Small, headed that group up. And basically we were tasked with providing Canadians with information about all of the aspects of the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. And because I had oil and gas experience, they said, okay, you're going to be in the natural resources sector because you understand oil and gas. And what did the Canada-U.S. free trade mean for Canadians in that industry? And so we were, handwriting brochures, pamphlets to be distributed nationwide. And it was funny, we were all sort of working away in this room, and we produced our stuff, but we had an editor from the Reader's Digest come in, and he said, yeah, we're going to wash it through this guy, he's going to look at them all. And he came into the room and he said, how many of you here have an undergraduate degree? And everybody put up their hand. And how many of you guys are in graduate school have got a graduate degree? And a bunch of us put up our hand. And how many of you guys got PhDs? And a couple more guys put up their hands. And he goes, that's your problem. He says, you're writing at a level that the ordinary Canadian can't understand. He said, Reader's Digest has written at a grade 8 level. He says,
interesting.
You got to learn to communicate better.
Yeah.
And, understand from their perspective. Because we were trying to be technically correct. And he said, not good.
No one could understand.
No one can understand what you're telling them. So he said, fascinating, really smart guy, and an interesting take on how it all worked. So again, fascinated by the input that we get from a pro.
That would serve you well later in life, I would imagine.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All of these lessons, they just you sort of pile up. As long as you can, you can remember them, boy, they are foundations to your career.
So just, touch a little bit on, so you're in the private sector, then you go to government. And, for me, I've never worked in the government. I've been on the receiving end of some of the service and trying to procure.
Yeah.
Not an easy place to work, but I guess you're on something that's so interesting. Talk a little bit about the juxtaposition of private versus government.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's totally different. And in the private sector, you are willing to take more risks simply because it's a profit and loss kind of thing. Nobody has any thoughts about whether or not you were well-intentioned. You're in business. Your intention is to make money for the shareholders. Yeah. That's your only goal. And in government, everything is more cautious because it is not that anything nefarious is going on, but the question is, are you using the taxpayers' money incorrectly? And because of that fear, there is much more bureaucracy, much more caution. Not many things get done quickly, and it's not the individuals. I mean, when I worked later on, I worked in the Prime Minister's office, and I met some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. Everyone's got a graduate degree or a PhD, and they're hardworking and they're super dedicated, but they're shackled to some degree because. They think, oh, waste in government. Well, there really isn't that much waste in government because we shackle the people. I mean, if you had to walk around with a 50-pound weight on your back every day, you wouldn't be moving as fast.
No.
And that's what bureaucracy does.
Interesting.
And you are hyper cautious about making a mistake. So everything is checked and rechecked. Where in the private sector, they ask, they would ask me, you think we should do that? Yeah, okay, fine, let's go.
Yeah.
So there wasn't 25 people checking on the decision that we made. It's okay. That's your decision to the best of your abilities. Yes, well, let's move ahead. In government, that was never enough. It just seemed to be, everything was done more cautiously because there was a worry about, waste in government.
All that being said, I still think. Is there, and I want to draw on your experience here now about U.S. versus Canada. Canada seems more governmentally based. Am I right, or am I completely wrong in that?
Absolutely correct. And there's just no doubt. I mean, when I see, the level of not so much intervention in the government, but there's a grant for this, there's something for that. There's so many businesses tied to government, where that is just, not the case in the States. The government, of course, is there, but it's a free enterprise from the get-go. Whereas, in Canada, it is. I mean, if you look at the the numbers of layers of government, and you've got the municipal government, and then the provincial government, and then the federal government. I mean, they have all of those levels in the States, but the government is just much more involved in the day-to-day operations of Canada. I mean, we rarely would see an ad in the States, brought to you by the the U.S. federal government. I mean, certainly agencies did that sort of stuff, but that's not at all uncommon on television here.
Yeah, that's
to
true.
see ads from the federal government. So it's just a different way of doing business, and it's not good or bad. It's just different, and I think it hurts the economy in a way because you're not as you're more risk adverse here.
Well, the statistics are showing that Canada's productivity is dropping.
Yes.
So, frankly, I'm very excited about sitting with you because we're going to, talk more about your journey. But the fact that Canada's productivity is dropping is alarming. Why? I have two boys, as you know one of them.
Yep.
They need to know that you put a hard day's work in, you will be rewarded. I'm trying to figure out how Canada can get better. And someone like you, who's come back to Newfoundland and back to Canada, has that perspective, I think,
Yeah, I just think that we have to be less risk averse. I mean, in the States, the difference, the Canadian mentality and the U.S. mentality. The U.S. mentality, success is not the absence of failure. You learn from failure in the States. So many entrepreneurs that so many people that I dealt with, they try, they fail, they try, they fail, they try, they fail, they try. Oh my God, they hit it. And so they're willing to just go over that, and they look at that business failure as feedback. It's like, I learned from that, I learned from that, I learned from that. Whereas in Canada, we're less willing to fail, and we take failure as defeat. And the Americans, failure is feedback. And I learn from that, I move on. I learn from that, I move on. And I know that when we were in business, we would make decisions, and they didn't work out 100% all the time. And to me, that was like, oh, that's okay. Okay, next decision. We learned from that. And the most successful guys, their overnight success, 10 years of failure, and now they're an overnight success.
Yeah.
So they've had a lot of experience failing, but they never stop trying. I mean, in Canada, we sort of pray for opportunity. In the Yanks, the Americans look for opportunity.
Yeah.
They absolutely look for it everywhere, every stone, they see opportunity. And the funny thing is, when you look at the U.S. economy, when times are bad, that's when most businesses start down there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I always said to my colleagues. I said, when times are bad, that's when the most opportunities are. That's when absolutely the most opportunities, because somebody's got to sell because their business is distressed. I mean, we bought a business. One of the last, I guess it was the sixth hospital that we bought. A friend called me up about a week before Christmas, and he said, "Hey, you're interested in getting into business, buying another hospital?" And I thought, "Oh, great! This guy wants to start a business with me. Get together." And he said, "No, come on down." And so I went down, drove down to Salem. I was in Portland, and 30 minutes away.
We're talking
Oregon,
about,
yeah, we're
right?
talking Oregon. And I went to see him. I said, "Hey, Mark, how's it going?" And he said, "Let's go outside." And he said, "Business is failing. Haven't paid the rent in 3 months. Haven't paid any of the utilities. If I don't pay the rent in 10 days, you're going to kick me out. Do you want to buy my business?" And I said, "Wow, Mark, that's quite the sales pitch."
Sounds like a great business.
Sounds like a great business. So I asked him. I said, "How much do you need? How much do you want?" And he said, "This is how much money I want." I said, "Okay, fine." So I called my lawyer up, and I said, "Arnie," I said, this is the deal." And he's a lawyer, and he's a CPA and a friend. He says, "Why don't you just wait 10 days? It's free." And I said, "But he's a friend of mine, And I said that I'd like to help him out and see how it goes." And he said, he said, "Is that?" He said, "Well, have they got any books?" And I said, "No, he didn't pay his accountant from the year before, so the accountant didn't give him his books, and he hasn't done them all year long. And this is December the 20th."
Yeah.
So I says, "Well, has he done anything?" And I said, "There's a big box of invoices on the floor." I said, "That's it. I have no idea." He says he doesn't even know what his sales are for the year. And he pays his staff. When the money comes in, he counts the cash, and then he gives them the cash, and then what's not left, he writes a check for the rest of them. And they go to the bank, and some guys get the cash checked, other guys don't because there's nothing left in the account. So
Holy crap.
yeah, we took a gamble, and we bought the clinic, and 10 years later, we sold it for 25 times what we paid for it. So it was the best investment we had, but it was the biggest risk we had.
I'm going to jump back. We've kind of jumped ahead a little bit because people don't understand exactly what you were in, kind of the in part before you sold it all.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating story, and we'll, as I said, get more into it. So, where did we leave off with your journey?
I was just started in government. So
right.
Started in government and started off virtually writing pamphlets on the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. But I had a mentor, David Small, and he had been in politics for a while, bright young guy, and well connected with the party. And from the Free Trade Operations Group, I went to Gerry Matthew's office, Gerry from New Brunswick, and worked with Gerry for a few years, and then went over to Kim Campbell in the Justice Department. And then from the Justice Department, ended up in the Prime Minister's office.
You're still relatively junior, or have you advanced?
Oh, every step is a step up.
Yeah.
And I was the Assistant Director of Communications Coordinations in the Prime Minister's office. So 40 departments, I had 20 departments, and you're basically coordinating all of the communications between the departments and the Prime Minister's office. So if anything happens, they run it through me, we run it up the flagpole, we just say, okay, this is what's going on. And we were just basically there to provide advice and to say, okay, well, what happened here? How are we dealing with this? And at that time, a couple of big things happened. The Iraqi war, that was a biggie. The Oka crisis, which we were dealing with that. I mean, I can remember having meetings.
Who was Prime Minister during those? Mulroney, yeah.
And Kim Campbell was in Justice. And we had meetings 7 days a week. And I can remember, leaving. I lived about 45 minutes out of town. And I can remember leaving the Prime Minister's office. And on my way home, by the time I got home, my wife would say, "Oh, they just phoned you. They want you back." So I would, get in my car and drive back. And
this is a level of dedication that a lot of people don't realize. Really?
No,
right?
In the federal government, at the level that I was dealing with, I mean, there are some extraordinarily intelligent and dedicated people. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of these people that work in anonymity, and I can remember it was we were talking, a bunch of us one day late at night on a Friday night, still at the office, and there was an application on the desk. And I looked at it and I said, "Single, married, divorce," and I said, "Yes," and in that order. Because so many of the guys that I worked with, they were single, and at the time I was, and then another large proportion of them were divorced because of the demands of the office, and they gave a lot of it, and we all had a chuckle. Yeah, single, married, divorced, and in that order, and that was just the reality of that, the level of person that I worked at. So I have nothing but respect for the people that are in government, because they're burdened. I mean, if you put a backpack on any of us and put 50 pounds of rocks in it, it'd be harder to be productive. Yeah. And that's sort of what bureaucracy is, to ensure that all of the rules are followed, and to ensure that everything has a certain way of getting done, and that's called bureaucracy.
So you're finishing up with government. You've made a decision to go to back to school. Back
to school again, and this time I am convinced that I'm going to get my MBA in the States, and hopefully to realize my goal of being a senior executive or CEO of a Canadian or U.S. company. So off to the States I go, and I'm enjoying it. in class one day.
Which university?
Purdue University in Indiana. And I'm in class one day, and the dean comes in and says, John, can I speak to you? Why would the dean want to talk to me? So I come out of the classroom, and he says, the Prime Minister's office just called. And I said, what? He said, oh, the Prime Minister's office called. And I said, what are they calling about? Oh, they want you back in Ottawa, to, do something on the campaign. And I thought, wow, who do they call? And the dean said, oh, they call the president of the university. And I was just amazed because, people in power, have no problems using that power.
Yeah,
I mean, they didn't call the dean of the school, they called the president of the school and said, hey, the Prime Minister's office, we got a student there, used to work with us, can you excuse him? And, bring him on back. And I thought, man, I said, no. And because I thought that was another chapter in my life. And luckily I did, because we lost by a landslide. That was a terrible campaign, and just lucky that I said no. But and I was enjoying my time at Purdue, and so I stuck around and finished my degree, and then got a job, fortunately, at Motorola at their semiconductor division in Austin, Texas. And I mean, in all the textbooks, Motorola is the place to go. Motorola is the place to go. Six Sigma. And I got there, and the gentleman that hired me, Neil Dial, said, John, he said, I'm from the cellular division. He said, this is semiconductors. He said, this is not the center of excellence. He said, far from it. He says, it's just he says, it's a mess. And, and that's why he was brought in to take, basically take over and get it all fixed up. And my direct boss, John Nichols, same thing. He got brought into. They basically wiped out everybody in that division because it wasn't working.
What was the division ever working, and then it slipped, or was it just never really where it needed to be ever?
Well, I think it never really got to where they wanted it to be.
Right.
And because we were in the prototype, so we were developing new chips. We were stabilizing the testing procedures. So you would make the wafer. Then the wafer would go over to Malaysia, where it was laser cut, and then it was put in a package, what they call a package. So it's a ceramic package that you see the chip in. Then it comes back to the States. Then we develop a testing procedure and how to efficiently test these chips. So once we get a stable testing procedure, so we know that the chips work fine, then those chips, or the whole thing, is shipped back over to Malaysia, and then they do it at a much lower cost. So we were tasked with getting a stable testing process in place. And basically, when you buy a semiconductor, right, I never knew this before I was there, it goes through a various number of steps. We test it on a big machine. We put it in what they call burn-in, so they send heat and electricity through that for, it starts off with, multiple weeks, and then it goes down to like a 4-hour test. So by the time it gets through all of that, semiconductors never wear out. They last forever. It's your computer, basically becomes obsolete. The semiconductor doesn't wear out because by the time we finish testing it, it's assured that it doesn't.
Interesting.
But it was, I was only there for 16 months, but an amazing experience. And, the one thing that you learn in Motorola, and I'm sure all of the semiconductor, businesses, is utilization. You've got these massive facilities. The one we were at was 7,500 people. And the assets that I was responsible for, we had 25 what they call testers, and each one of the testers was worth $1.5 million, and each of them had two handlers, which a mechanical device that brought the semiconductor to the head of the tester was worth $500,000. This was back in 1994. So I mean, just a tremendous amount of capital involved in these things. And at Motorola, if you could increase utilization by 1%, I mean, your profit margins just went crazy. I mean, it was that fine a line between not making it and blowing it out of the park. So, I was in there, and I can remember my boss saying to me, John Nichols when I was interviewing him. He said, "You know, I really don't want to hire you, but Neil told me I had to because you were a good student."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, you know," he says, "Well, you're not an engineer, and this is an engineering job." And I said, "John," I asked him the one question. I said, like, "Do you have people or do you have processes?" And he goes, "Yeah, both." And I said, "I'm good at both of those things." So I said, "I don't think I have to have an engineering degree. I had to have a different perspective." And he said, "Yeah, whatever." And so started at Motorola.
I love that story, particularly because you're not an engineer, and they've been hiring all these engineers who couldn't solve the problem.
Right.
They bring someone from the outside,
Yeah.
different perspective.
Different perspective.
What a lesson for business, isn't it?
It really is, and you know, it's fascinating because I've always, you know, been interested in learning about learning, you know, metacognition, and it takes a variety of skill sets to get anything done. And, you know, in a team, you do get groupthink. I mean, there were some smart people at Motorola. I mean, my boss, John Nichols, had his MBA, had his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, and he had been there 18 months and, like, just wasn't making progress. And, you know, I can remember the one chip that was the most important chip to Motorola at the time because it was being produced for Apple, the 68,000 series. And it was just so far behind. It was incredible. So I said to my direct boss then, Gordon Yannon, I said, "Well, let me take a look at it." And he said, he goes, "Well, whatever." He says, "You can't screw it up. You know, it's already so screwed up." And then I just did a little bit of investigating and started to talk to people and that sort of actually did it. And the first thing I did is I went into an area called burn-in, which is where you put the semiconductors on this board and then you put them in an oven and you bake them at 400 degrees and you send electrical current through it. And that just tests the chip. And so I thought, well, you know, how are we doing this? And that operation was unbelievably bottlenecked, because they had these test boards and they had 8 or 10 sockets on them, and sometimes only 2 of the sockets were working. So right off the bat, you were looking at 20% utilization, and I said, that's got to stop. I said, You can't send a board in that doesn't have at least 50% of the sockets working. So the gentleman that was responsible, Leroy, best handshake I've ever had in my life. That man had a grip like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Never forget it. And he said, "That's what you want to do? Well, let's do it." And sure, in a very short period of time, he just put one technician on it, and he was taking all the boards that had 4+ good sockets, and then started to add and add and add until all of the boards had 100% good sockets.
Wow.
All of a sudden, throughput through that one area was through the roof. And I said, "Leroy, why didn't anybody ask you about this?" He says, "That's just it. Nobody ever asked. Nobody thought that this was a bottleneck." So then as I say, the theory of constraints, you solve one bottleneck, then you create another, and then there was another. And so on the other side of the plant, there was this big tester, and it wasn't being used. So I went to the lead over there, and I said, "What do we do that for? Why we never use that?" "Oh, that tests the 6800 series, but we never need to use it because there's not enough chips." So I said, "Fire it up." And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Fire it up." He says, "We never use." I said, "Fire it up." And the next day I brought over like 10,000 chips, and I said, "I want them all tested by the weekend." And he goes, "What?" I said, "Everyone, Alan." I said, 7/24, we're open 7/24. I want somebody on this machine from 6 o'clock on Friday night till 7 a.m. on Monday morning. And he said, "Okay, we can do it." And sure enough, at the end of the weekend, there was 10,000 chips tested. And, everybody was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And I go like, "Not really." You just weren't looking.
Yeah.
And, and so, that there's a lesson to be learned there. If you're in an organization, don't look to do the easy stuff. Look to do the hard stuff and make it look easy.
Yeah.
And what that does, for someone in an organization is the first thing that Motorola said to me was, well, can you figure out this problem for us? And I said, sure, let's give it a go, and sure enough, and soon enough, they asked me to solve other difficult problems. But that usually means that you're going to get a promotion, because the people that are supposed to solve the problems are not solving the problems. And if somebody new comes in and starts solving the problems, then they decide that that person better be in charge because he's solving all the problems. So I guess the lesson to be learned is, solve the toughest problems. If you fail, everybody expects you to fail. They're the toughest problems. So there's no downside to not getting it done because they couldn't do it. But if you come in and make the tough problems look easy, then the world just opens up for you. And that happened for me at Motorola. I mean, boom, boom, boom. I'm, 2 promotions later, I'm in charge of that division. And I had been there 6 months.
Wow. I love that story. I have a similar story. Being in sales and business development, I would always, when we had a new product or a new pitch or whatever, go to the toughest clients first. I'd pick a couple, and they would tear me apart. Well, I was ready after being with them to pitch it properly to the next person, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I picked that. So Motorola's done. You've gone. Where do you go from there?
After Motorola, well, the reason we left Motorola is they were adamant about sending me overseas. And I was like, I barely know where the bathroom is at this plant, because the plants are just monstrous. I mean, the cafeteria sat 1,500 people. Yeah. Just huge. And I was solely focused on operations. When I went there, I was supposed to be on a 2-year training program. So you're 8 months in operations, 8 months in marketing, 8 months in finance. And after 3 months, Neil Dial, the guy that hired me, said, "Program's over. You're not leaving. Screw it." He says, "You're not going to finance." And he says, "You're not going to marketing. You're not leaving operations." I said, "But I thought that was the training program." He says, "It's over. Forget it." So I realized then that there had to be a dearth of talent at Motorola. I mean, I haven't been there that long, and they're looking to send me off to be the second in command at a plant, overseas. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But then they came to me and said, "Well, how about you start up a plant in China or Vietnam?" And I said, "We don't have a plant there." "Well, somebody's got to go." And I thought, well, what about the war in Vietnam? We haven't solved that one yet. And China in 1994 was a lot different than it is today. Yeah. And then they said, "How about Burundi?" And I said, "Where is Burundi?" And my wife immediately said, "We're not going to Burundi. So what's our alternative?" So we decided to move to Portland, Oregon, and buy a vet hospital there. And just picked up, and they were shocked at Motorola. Yeah. Because you're going through this company like a hot knife through butter, and you're leaving. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Want to try something different?"
So your wife is the veterinarian.
Wife is the smart one. She's the vet. Yep.
You have no veterinarian background whatsoever.
Zero.
Except for what she may have told you in passing in a conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here we go again. You're coming at something with no real knowledge.
Not a lick. No. Other than the only thing I knew about vet medicine was my wife was one. And that was it. Yeah. And ironically, that was the luckiest thing that happened to us. Yeah. And that sounds so counterintuitive. But when we went there, my wife was the expert in vet medicine, and I knew nothing about it. But what that did is that forced me to work on the business, as I was saying to you before, not in the business. So my wife could make, gains in doing more procedures or doing the surgeries better, or better diagnostics. And all I could do was work on the business. And that's not typically what happened. So, what was my job? Make customer service better, better staff training, lower staff turnover, better inventory management, monthly doing the books to see where you're going, where you're heading. All of the little things that make a business better, but I wasn't working on the end product. I wasn't working on the product that we were selling or the product or the service that we were providing. The veterinarians did that, but she was an expert in that. She was, very smart, and her dad had been in the home hardware business all his life, so she understood customer service.
Right.
And her philosophy is always one customer at a time. We're going to treat that one customer great. When they're in the exam room with me, you have my undivided attention, and whatever you need, we're going to get for you.
And she was Canadian? Did her
Oh yeah, she's an Ottawa girl.
studied in Canada?
She went to Guelph University.
Right.
And in veterinary medicine, when you write your national boards, they're North American boards.
Yeah.
So you can work anywhere in North America.
So it's interesting, as a Canadian, sometimes the U.S. is pretty intimidating. And you guys bought a business in Portland, you said, right?
Yep.
Was there hesitation? Like, here's two Canadians, and here we are now going to compete in the United States.
Well, I don't. Reflecting on it, there really wasn't, and I think I reflecting, I say we were prepared, and by that I mean, we didn't have any student debt. I saved up for my tuition at Purdue, and back then it was, I think, $75,000 or $87,000 U.S.
Wow.
For 2 years, but we had saved up for that, so didn't have to get a student loan. When we first got married, we worked very hard to pay off all of Sherry's student loans. So boom, paid off all of Sherry's student loans. We were still renting at the time, so when we moved to Purdue, bought a house, the mortgage interest and principal, a house in West Lafayette, Indiana, that was $437. House was $42,500, 1992. So very inexpensive, easy to sell. So went to Austin, Texas, but now we're in Portland, and we're there, but we don't have any debt, don't have any student loans, don't have a mortgage, don't own anything on our old beater car. So we're pretty footloose and fancy free. And that is very liberating. When you start a business, we had $10,000, and we had to put a deposit on a house and a down payment on the practice that we were buying. So we only had $10,000. So I said, okay, well, we're going to have to figure out something with the guy that we're buying the clinic from, and he was a fellow Canadian. So he said, okay, well, you give me the $10,000, I'll lend you back $15,000 that you can put on the mortgage for your house, and then we'll add that $15,000 onto the price of the business.
Wow.
So I thought,
interesting.
If that's what you want to do,
yeah.
And so that's what we did. And so our initial investment wasn't big, and thanks to this guy who desperately wanted to sell this practice.
Did he stay on at the practice?
Oh no, he was done. He was done.
Was he a vet?
He was a veterinarian and a lawyer, but he basically lived in Southern California.
A vet and a lawyer.
A vet and a lawyer, Canadian. So he didn't even live there, and the practice was he had one owner that bought it and then turned it back over to him. Then he brought somebody else in. So he was like looking to get rid of this, get it off his hands, and had been unsuccessful. He had unsuccessfully tried for I think 2 or 3 attempts. So we were the next hope type of thing. So gave us better terms, and again, we were prepared. We were prepared, and we both had graduate degrees. We both had advanced degrees. So if it didn't work out, we could always find a job.
Yeah.
So I think that was what made it less intimidating, is that what's the worst that can happen? We put $10,000 in, and we both could get jobs. I had a freshly minted MBA, had great job experience at Motorola, had job offers from HP when I left in my back pocket. So I could have gone back. I could have gone back to Motorola.
Yeah.
And they would have happily asked me to come back. So we were secure in that respect. So and that was the key. But we were prepared, and we had a plan.
So you're in the business, your wife's the vet, you're working on the business, not in the business, which
Yep.
is a huge difference. In that industry,
Yep.
the vet is often the person who owns it and doing all of it, I guess.
Well, back
Is it?
yeah. Oh, back then, when my wife Sherry got into vet medicine in 1985, it was 65% men, 35% women, and in 1986, when she got in, it was 65% women, 35% men. So that's when it flipped. So when we got into business in Portland, the vast majority of veterinary hospitals were owned by the male doctor, and his wife, who was either the receptionist or a technician, is the office manager. So that's the standard sort of operating procedure for these veterinary clinics. So you've got someone who is maybe a good technician or a receptionist, but really didn't know how to run a business. Yeah. And the veterinarian, the husband, is in the back working in the business, so he doesn't see what's going on up front. He doesn't understand the dynamics. He doesn't know if there's a lineup out the door and customer service is lousy, or you're pumping him through at a great speed and everybody's happy. Because he's busy in the back, has no idea what's going on. It's like, running a pizza shop, and all you're doing is you're pumping the charcoal into the furnace, and you have no idea if they're burning the pizzas or if they're burning the building down. You just keep putting coal in the fire. Yeah. And so they were blissfully unaware of what was going on.
So you own the business, you're working on the business, and I'm really curious as to, so you start doing fairly well, obviously.
Yeah.
You're not taking that money and spending it lavishly. You're, I think, reinvesting. Tell us a little bit about where you are with that thinking.
Yeah, we, the funny thing is that when we bought the first clinic, the very first day we bought it, I said to Sherry, we're going to sell the first 2 big clinics in 10 years. And she goes, what? And I said, we have a plan. We're going to sell the first 2 big clinics in 10 years. And she said, we bought this like an hour ago. We're going out for supper now to celebrate. And I said, I know, and we're still going to sell them in 10 years.
The competitive hockey player is back.
Yeah, we're going to do this. So she goes, whatever. But she's all in. She's all in. And first clinic, we're like knocking it out of the ballpark. And it's so busy that we have to put chairs out on the front of the rental space to accommodate people, because there's no room in our waiting room. We're just so busy. So I decided, okay, well, let's look around. So we looked at a location probably, as the crow flies, only about 5 miles from where we were. And everybody said, oh, you're too close, you're too close, you're too close. And I said, well, not really, because I said the vast majority of the people that come to this clinic are in that zip code over there. And then the next highest bunch of people are from this zip code over here, and they're across the river, across the bridge, and on the other side of the highway. So I said, I think it's different. And they all went, well, okay, whatever, you're just gonna waste your money. But again, back then we built out a clinic for $134,000. It would run you $750,000 today.
You're talking about ground up.
It was rental space.
Okay.
So it was just 4 empty walls. We put everything in, cabinetry, flooring, the whole 9 yards. And that we opened that business on June 23rd, 1997. And by December of that year, we had turned a profit. Just unbelievly busy.
I'm trying to get a picture of the United States, because in Canada, did you use your own money to do that? Was it some loans?
Oh, 100% bank.
Bank.
100% bank. But we now had been in business for 2 years.
Right.
And
you had the confidence that you knew this was going to work.
We had the confidence, and the bank could see that, because we didn't borrow any money from the bank. So we were, we had the owner that he financed it. And we didn't need operating capital. I mean, we got it from the get-go. I mean, luckily for me, I stayed back in Austin, Texas for 3 months working at Motorola. And when I told them I was going to quit, they said, well, don't quit. Well, how about we, double your salary? Okay, that would be all right. And how about we pay you a per diem of $150 a day to stay? And I said, okay, that'll be all right. And then I said, at the end of the month, I'm going to go, well, we'll give you $250 a day to stay, plus your salary and this and that. So at the end, they were paying me $350 a day per diem.
Wow.
In addition to my salary, they would fly me home every second weekend.
That's pretty addicting.
I tell you. And they paid for I drove a van all the way back to Portland, and they paid for that. And when I was, the last day I was leaving Motorola, the boss, Neil, said, let me drive you to the airport. I said, no, that's okay, I'll take a cab. And in the cab, he said, on the drive to the airport, he said, we'll give you $25,000 bonus to come back. We'll buy your house. I said, no, I'm not coming back. So
Here's a pot of gold.
yeah. So, you know, it was, even
The money didn't matter, obviously,
well, it convinced me more that was not the thing to do. So, I mean, we were happy. But, you know, getting back to the first business, I mean, it took off like a rocket ship. And that said, wow, we've got something going here. And then we opened up 3 more in the next 3 years. We opened up 1 a year.
In Portland.
In you know, various suburbs of Portland. But Portland's, you know, it's a large city. It's, you know, 2 million people back then. And we were just, you know, on the outskirts. We weren't even in Portland. You know, none of the clinics were in Portland proper. They were all in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. You know, they were just doing very well. And we embraced the fact that women were the predominant labor force for veterinarians in the marketplace. So when others said, well, we don't want to hire women because, you know, they get pregnant and they have babies and they leave, or they only work part-time, we embraced that and said, you know, what days do you want to work? How many days you want to work? You know, you tell us and we'll accommodate. And that allowed us, because we had a different mindset, to get all sorts of veterinarians.
On that note, so what is it, like, I'm trying to figure out, you know, how did you get so busy? But obviously you really made a team work, didn't you not?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's, you know, from that competitive hockey, you know, it's teamwork is everything. And the other thing that we did, and maybe because we were Canadian, all of our staff from the very first clinic had health care. And everybody had it. And you work full-time, you get health care.
That cost you guys a lot of money, did it not?
It was the highest expense we had on a monthly, more than the rent. You know, I mean, other than, you know, the wages, but after labor costs, it was health care, then the rent. So significant, but it absolutely reduced our turnover rate, and it allowed us to hire, you know, lots of people.
How early in the business did you introduce healthcare?
Oh, first day.
The very first clinic?
First clinic. Because we had to have it.
Did your wife think you were crazy at this point?
Absolutely nuts.
Absolutely. She's a vet. She knows how this works.
Right.
No one else is doing this, and you're throwing this idea in there.
Well, because it was we had to have it.
Yeah.
You know, we were like everybody else. We had to have health care.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, how many employees do you have? And I said, well, let me count, you know. And I said, okay, sign them all up. So and everybody was like, Yahoo. You know, we've finally got health care.
You paid the full amount, or did they have to do a contribution as well?
I think at that time I was paying 75%. Yeah. But that only cost them, you know, that was $25 or something. So
okay. Yeah. No big expense.
No big expense for them, and
huge
we always
benefit.
Huge benefit, and we always kept it, like, you know, below $100, so whatever it was.
Well, you are in the health field, even though it's pets, right? Makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I mean, because you know, we were with Kaiser Permanente, and they were fantastic. They were an HMO, and they believed in preventative care. So they made sure that you got your flu vaccines and all of that sort of stuff, and, you know, dental care. And we had it was dental, optical, and medical. So it was really good health care.
John, you know, I'm going to dig more into this business. We've been talking now about an hour, but let's talk about the business itself. So you're now 3 clinics, you say, in Portland?
3.
What year are we approximately?
We're now at 98.
1998.
Yeah.
So
2 more.
The first one was what year?
95 September.
So 3 years later, you're into 3 clinics.
Yeah.
Wow. How many staff approximately in 3 years in?
Probably 60 plus.
Jesus. Like 60. This small business, and then this is not that small, 60 employees.
Right, and that's what my bookie used to say, Susan, bookkeeper. She says, you're no longer a small business. You know, you're a big small business.
Yeah.
And then we got to 5, and
5 clinics.
5 clinics.
Yeah.
And then
all in Portland area.
All in the Portland area. Yeah, all in the Portland area.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were doing well, and my wife kept saying to me, she said, like, you know, when are we going to start making any money? When are we going to start making any money? When are we going to start making? She says, I'm working like a dog.
You're pumping it all back in, aren't you?
I'm pumping every cent back in. So finally, 2000. So we had just bought our last clinic in 1999, and owed the bank a fair amount of money. But the first two clinics, the Westland Clinic and the Clackamas Clinic, are just rocking it. They are just enormously busy. And I said to her, let's go out for supper. So it was, I think, September-ish in 2020, or 2000. And I said, the good thing is that we don't owe the bank any money. We've paid off all of the debt at all of the clinics, and we paid off our mortgage. And she goes, what? I go, yeah, we are debt-free.
Wow.
In 5 years, even though we had 5 clinics. But the clinics were spinning off an enormous amount of money, and we were able to, we opened up every clinic in the 4th quarter of the year. And in U.S. tax law says you can open up one day, you get the full depreciation for the entire year because you opened up in that year. So all of our purchases, all of our clinics opened up in Q4. So we got, we'd spend, $150, and all of a sudden you get to write off all of the expenses you put in to build that clinic instantly. So the next year there's no taxes to be paid. So although we made lots of profit because we had the tax laws, didn't have to pay tax that year. The next year we opened up another clinic, didn't have to pay taxes again, took all that money and poured it back into the clinics. Do that 5 times. Now I'll admit that in 2021, or 2001, we had one heck of a tax bill.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden now you've got 5 clinics that are making money, and there wasn't a 6th one at that time. So it was like, ooh. But
did you feel like, oh my God, I've made mistakes here now, or
no, because again, the cash flow was great.
Yeah.
So it was like, but it was just a different mindset because we went from just expansion mode to okay, now we got to start paying some taxes.
Yeah.
And but that was an easy transition when the cash flow was good.
I'm fascinated by a cash flow versus you got so many, 5 clinics. How many employees you got now?
Oh, we're close to 100, I would think.
So I think about payroll, and what I don't know because I've never done it is, you have X amount of dollars in the bank. You're pumping that into buying new clinics, but you also know you need to have money for the payroll. Like, how do you cash manage? Like, I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, that was the scary part because that there are 98 people relying on you for their rent or their mortgage.
Wow.
But we lived, very modestly. I can remember one of my receptionists coming up to me one day and she said, like, you own 5 clinics. She said, how come you're not driving a Corvette? And I looked at her and I said, I own 5 clinics because I'm not driving a Corvette. I put all of the money back into the business. And, and we were doing fine. I mean, again, didn't have any debt, didn't have a mortgage by then. So it's like, how much money do you need to live? So we were doing fine.
I don't know if I mentioned to you when we had lunch that day, but I listened to a podcast called The Founders. I think, did I mention that to you?
No, I can't remember.
The one theme throughout all of that, he basically reads biographies about founders like yourself, and he said every single one of the most successful founders are so cautious about expenditures, and they really take care of it. Listening to you talk, you remind me of listening to him talk about all these founders. Just because you got, $1 million in the bank or $500,000 to go out and buy a car is ludicrous.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It's not working for you.
No.
You're not, the money's not working for you.
And then you got to pay tax on whatever that money you take out, right?
Right. And the other thing that we did, and I can remember that's when PetSmart, VetSmart, Veterinary Centers of America were starting to come into the vet medicine business. And all of my colleagues, the people that we knew, were just petrified when they would open up close to them. And they said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to find a location as close to them as I can. And they go like, what?
They thought you're crazy.
They thought I was crazy. And I said to them, they are a great marketing machine. They bring in clients like nobody's business. But because their service is so poor, they lose clients like nobody's business. So when they're unhappy walking out of the clinic, the first thing I want them to see is my clinic.
That's very different thinking, John.
Yeah.
Very different.
And so they would come out and they would say, oh, well, I'm at Valley Animal Hospital. I might as well go over there. And because they were in the neighborhood, so we were close, and it's true. I mean, those clinics would, spill more clients than I could ever, take care of. It's like Coors Light spills more beer than Sam Adams makes.
Yeah.
And that was the reality in vet medicine. And that's probably the same case today.
Fascinating. So, 2001, I think you say 5 clinics?
5 clinics.
That's not where you ended.
No, that's not where we ended.
Tell us more.
Well, we took a bit of a break, and then, sort of
took a break.
Yeah.
You've got 100 employees and you're calling that a break.
Talking that a break. And so we're working on, getting all of the clinics, together. And one of the clinics that we did open, we opened because a friend asked us to open it. They were working at another location a long way from where they lived. And they said to me, can you open up a clinic out where we live? I said, sure, let's do it. So we took some time and we opened
took a partner on? Is that what you're saying?
No. They were just friends.
Yep.
So we opened up a clinic way out on the northwest side, a place called Forest Grove. Lovely community. And put them in right off the bat and said, okay, you're the 2 veterinarians here. We're not going to be the vets. You're going to be the vets. And the deal was, as soon as it starts to break even, we're going to sell it to you. And that's exactly what we did. And that was, good for your heart, good for your soul, because they couldn't afford to do it. We could, but we were guaranteed that it was going to work out because they wanted it to work out.
Yeah.
And as they said, like, why are you doing this? And I said, well, there's no interest like self-interest. And I said, in this clinic, you have a self-interest to make sure that it succeeds. And they crushed it. They were fantastic. So that was the first one we sold. And then we sort of realized, okay, we can do this again. But 9/11 hit. Things sort of slowed down a little bit in the States. And then my friend Dr. Stoner called and said, hey, John, close to Christmas, as I had mentioned earlier, you want to buy a clinic? And as I said, I thought he was wanting to get into business with me to open up another one, and it was want to buy his clinic because it was failing. So we opened up that clinic there, and that clinic became our biggest clinic. And it was in a small, town, 38,000 people, Kaiser, Oregon.
How far from Portland?
40 minutes south of Portland.
Okay.
And right beside the capital, Salem. So there were 2 little cities side by side. Salem was 150,000, 165,000 then. And one-man practice. And over the years, we turned that into a 17-doctor practice. Expanded twice. And
was it some sort of like a center where people would come in? Because that's
no, it was a jewelry store,
yeah.
And there used to be a doctor's office, medical doctor's office, and so Dr. Stoner, who bought the clinic originally or opened it up, had it, and then we just kept expanding around as the economy got bad. Tenants would move out, and we would take their space. So basically, there was the jewelry store, and all of us surrounded it. We just kept expanding our business to take up all the available retail space he had. And the good thing is he had lots of parking. So it was wonderful. It was great for us, and that business was just booming.
Wow. So I've lost track of how many clinics you have now. What are we at?
Okay, well, we're back down to 5 because we sold one to a friend, and so we've got 5, and that's Christmas 2004. And that clinic is just taking off, just going crazy. And but we're getting close to our 10-year anniversary. So I thought, okay, it's now mid-2005. I had a plan to sell these. And so I started to talk to somebody, and somebody approached me and said, like, if you thought of selling those 2 big hospitals. And I didn't say, I've always had a plan to sell those 2 big hospitals, but I said, no, not really. Who's looking? And it was one of the corporate interests. So I entered, talks with them, and sure enough, they were interested in buying the first 2 big hospitals we had. And Sherry was very hesitant to sell because they were sort of her baby.
Yeah.
And the first 2 hospitals, and we were close to the staff, and the staff was like family to us because we lived in the community, and they were like family to us. And ended up selling the 2 hospitals 10 years and 4 months after we bought them. So the plan worked out as designed. I mean, the lucky part was that we decided to have a 10-year plan. So we sold it in 2006. Not if we had a 12-year plan, it'd be 2008 in the middle of the financial crisis. Would they have wanted to buy it?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah.
But it wasn't luck that we sold it. It was luck that we picked 10 years. But the plan was to sell it, and we did.
Does financials up and downs affect the industry? Because pets need help. They need you.
Right. They do.
But I guess if people are struggling financially, they'll put it off as long as it's not an emergency.
Right.
Yeah.
So they'll forego on routine exams. They'll forego on vaccines. They'll forego on, flea control. They'll forego on the things that really make your margins. That really cause you to be profitable.
Yeah.
So and it is a discretionary item. So they do cut back, for better or worse, but there is still always some underlying demand. But for us, I mean, the lesson learned there, and many of our fellow owners would talk to us later on, and they'd call Sherry up and say, "Hey, you guys have sold a bunch of hospitals. Can you let's go out for supper and let's talk about it." So Sherry said, "Sure, fine," because she knew the veterinary community well. I mean, she was the president of the Portland Veterinary Medical Association, so she knew a lot of the folks. And we'd go out and we'd visit them at their clinic, and here's a veterinarian. He's 65 years old, and he'd say, "So John, what do I need to sell?" And I'd say, "Well, it's late in the game to decide that you want to sell." And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're 65. You don't have a lot of runway left. You want to sell." I said, "These corporations want to buy multi-man practices. You're a sole practitioner. They want to buy They want to buy a business with lots of clients. You have a small clinic because there's only one of you." And I said, "You haven't done the maintenance around this building. You don't have new equipment because you're trying to bleed as much money out of it as possible." So I said, "It's now too late to prepare to sell this clinic, even though you're 65 and you want to get out." And many of them, if they could sell the business, a lot of them just walked away. They sold the building because they owned the building. They didn't get anything for the business. And if they did, it was a fraction of what we got.
Do many of them own the buildings? And
back then they did.
Did you?
No. We had rental space the entire time.
Interesting.
So, and that was the model. I mean,
that allowed you to move quickly if you had to as well, right?
Right. And that was the model that allowed you to realize the value of your business, of your efforts. Because I can remember one guy approached me one time and he said, "Hey, I know you buy and sell clinics, and you want to buy mine." And I went out to his practice, and a lovely, acre and a half lot, not a great building, but attractive, but again run down because they just let them run down. But great parking, great everything. And lousy equipment inside. And I said, "What do you want?" He goes, "$1.5 million." And I said, "You do $200,000 worth of business." I said, "If I poured every cent of that into the mortgage, I couldn't pay the mortgage."
Yeah.
I said, "So it's worth the land." So back then, most of the guys just sold it. So they worked 30 years and got nothing for their labors. They were lucky that they owned the real estate.
Wow.
So we decided, let's just focus on rental space. And realize 100% of our efforts in what we sold it for. So that's the model that we had adopted, and it was we were crushing it that way.
So what's the most number of clinics you held at any one time?
I think it was 6. I think we had 6 at one time, and we were busy.
Yeah.
I had to get some help in because you realize that when you've got 6 clinics. Everyone has a washer and dryer. I mean, we were going through washers and dryers because we used to do 10 loads of laundry a day. I was going through 5 washing machines and 5 dryers a year, because they only lasted 3 or 4 years.
I'm smirking because, you're thinking of veterinary clinic. You're not thinking of washers and dryers, but obviously you were.
Oh boy! Or even things like paper towels.
So you were literally like the washers and dryers were burning out because you were using them.
Using them so hard.
They're not meant for that.
Not meant for 10 loads a day, and heavy
you'd have
loads.
to go in. Did you have industrial ones or?
Well, we got commercial ones, but it
Still doesn't matter.
Still doesn't matter.
No.
I mean, because the big ones that they use in hotels required too much power. We couldn't get the power into the building because they required 400 amp service.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so because they are,
I didn't even know there was such a thing as
Yeah.
400 amp service.
Yeah, monstrosities. So they sucked power.
No kidding.
but
Pretty
they
expensive
were,
to operate too, I would imagine.
Well, they were $5,000 or $7,000 to buy.
Wow.
But I mean, they could do 5 loads compared to your regular washing machine. But when you turn that dryer on, I mean, the dams used to have to open up their floodgates because they drew a lot of power. So, we were doing all sorts of things, and keeping the clinics in things like paper towels and laundry detergent, and then going, to make sure that they've got all the inventory they need, or all the little things. So. At 6, we were sort of at our max, but then again, we had a plan, and we started to sell some clinics, and sold a couple more, and so then got down to a reasonable amount, and then the clinic in Kaiser just took off like a rocket ship, and we had moved to that area because when we sold our clinics in Portland, we had a 30-mile non-compete, so they really didn't want us to be in the neighborhood. And so we moved all the way down to the Kaiser area and focused like a laser on that practice. And that practice, again, went from a 1-doctor practice to a 17-doctor practice. And it was so busy that we expanded 10 kilometers south of us, 10 miles south of us, to another clinic. And with the hope that, because 65% of our clients were actually in that zip code, that they would go down there. And all that happened was that both clinics just exploded.
As you talk, I'm thinking about a question. Did you ever feel bulletproof at this point? Because you've had so much success. And on that question, how do you stay humble?
Well, I think we were too busy not to be humble. We worked hard at it. I mean, for the first 10 years, I said to my sisters, they said, "What have you done?" And I said, "Well, I've worked 7 days a week for the last 10 years straight." And I said, "I'm tired. I'm really busy." But we learned so many things, and it came from sort of crises. In 2008, when the financial crisis came, the U.S. economy really took a hit, probably harder than in Canada.
Yeah.
And many of my competitors were down 25, 35, 40%. So they were all doing fine when times were good, but they really suffered when times were bad. And they were laying off staff and struggling. And I just didn't want to lay anybody off. But we had to come up with a different strategy. So when their revenue was dropping, the answer is, well, just raise prices, so we'll try to counter it. But people are struggling financially. Raising your prices is only
not a very good strategy.
Not a good strategy, making it worse. So we introduced discounting 5 days a week. So it was Microchip Monday and Toenail Tuesday and Wonderful Wednesdays and Vaccine Value Days on Thursdays and Feline Fridays. So discounts on every day. And I tell you, the people flooded in like no tomorrow. I mean, we were just swamped. We were putting on, I think it was 342 new clients a month.
This is not common in the industry, I wouldn't say.
Well, not then, because everybody was we were going down like the Titanic.
Yeah.
But we did it counterintuitively. We thought, provide discounts, and it's like your cash flow is already hurting. Discounting, you're reducing your cash flow. But in fact, we made up with it with a lot more people. And the other thing that we did, and it's sort of like second order thinking, if this happens, then what else might happen? And the population were giving up their pets to rescue groups. So they said, I can't deal with Fluffy or Fido anymore, and they would relinquish their pet. And we had already established a good working relationship with a lot of rescue groups. So when that happened, they kept flooding into us, because the other places they might have gone kept raising their prices, and we said, no, we're going to continue to give you the discounts that we've always given you. And they weren't very profitable for us, but it provided cash flow. It kept everybody busy. No one got laid off. So again, we did things totally differently. And and as I said to one of my friends, if you're not the lead dog, your view never changes. You're looking at the butt of the dog ahead of you. And because we were the lead dog, we could see what was going on, and they couldn't. And it worked out marvelously for us. In that 4-year period during the crisis, our businesses more than doubled, where my colleagues were down 35% from where they were 4 years earlier.
Yeah.
So they were really struggling. So it's like, I guess the lesson is, take a small gamble, because the reward can be absolutely enormous. There's a book called Anti-Fragility. I don't know if you've read it, by Nassim Taleb, and he's an options trader, and he said that take 10% of your portfolio and put it in options with high risk, high return, and then 90% of it completely safe. And sometimes you lose the 10%, but if you hit it with the 10%, the benefit is just enormous. And it was for us. It was a 10x. It was just, we doubled our business. Mm-hmm. So the lesson there is, take a chance. I mean, don't get crazy. I mean, we only discounted 5% or 2% of the products we offered, but the reward was far disproportional to what we risked. But I mean, it was phenomenal for us. I mean, and as a result of that, we encountered more interest from corporate buyers. They thought, how can these guys be doing what they're doing when everybody else is pretending to be the Titanic?
Yeah.
And so that garnered interest, and I can remember we had a firm that used to download our software every night to send out electronic reminders for our pets, and they said that we only look at meta-analysis. We don't look at the clinics and things of that nature, but they downloaded everything. And I thought, okay, fine, and we did that for 4 years, and then on the 5th year, a different company bought that company out, and it was Veterinary Centers of America. And as soon as that happened, I started to get cards, in the mail. John, are you interested in selling your clinic? John, are you interested in selling your clinic? And I asked somebody that worked with that, not that company, but in the affiliate companies, I said, do they look at that data? Oh, no, they don't look at that data. They don't look at that. I said, it's funny, because as soon as they took over that service, all of a sudden I'm getting offers from you guys. Yeah. And I guess they just couldn't believe that we were adding 350, 400 new clients a month, every month, for 4 years.
Wow.
And they probably thought, when they first looked at it, they probably thought, well, that can't be true. But then when they went back and looked, and they saw this just incredible growth rate, they thought, we got to buy this clinic. So they kept sending us letters, and finally, the guy Chris, a friend of mine who worked for an affiliate company, said, just give them a call. He said, just give them a call. He said, they just want to make you an offer. And I said, okay, fine. And gave them a call, and they said, hey, why don't you buy your clinic? We want to do an appraisal. And I said, sure, take a look, and gave them everything. And in October of 2017, we sold that hospital for $5.5 million. So if I hadn't have been passionate about veterinary medicine before, I sure as hell was then.
I bet you were.
I mean, I was the guy that wanted to go into big business.
Yeah.
But I found my passion when I sold the first one at 2.5, and even more passion when I sold the next one.
So 2017, you're out completely?
No, that's just that one. That's just that one. So we, in the interim, we had opened up another one in Central Oregon, in Bend, Oregon. We bought a clinic that was failing in Tualatin, and then we opened up another one in Gladstone. And because I just couldn't do, hey, I sold those two. I got to get something else.
Yeah.
And my wife said, like, when are you going to stop?
You're addicted.
And yeah, I said, I think we have a formula that works.
Yeah.
And and to be honest, we had some veterinarians that had been working for us for, decades.
Yeah.
And I thought, we're going to set them up to succeed, because we're now on clinic 10, and we're winding down, and we've done well. We've done very well. So we opened up those 3 clinics, and we said to the people that are working there, do you want to buy them? And to a person they said, yes, but. And the but was, we can't afford them, because we know what you sell these for. And they said, like, that's an order of magnitude more than I can pay. And in each of the clinics, there was 2 of them, 2 partners in each one. And I said, well, if I give you an 80% family discount, will you buy them? And they went, yeah, we'll buy them at an 80% discount. But we could afford to do that. Mm-hmm. We could afford to do that, because, how much is enough? I mean, more would have been better, but we had done well enough. And these people didn't want to work for somebody else. I mean, one of them had worked with us for 17 years. We were the only employer she knew. And she says, I don't want to work for anybody else. And I said, and she said, but I can't afford your clinic. And I said, well, if I make it so that you can afford it, will you do it? And she goes, absolutely. So we did that, and they're all crushing it right now.
John, I'm absolutely overjoyed that you've spent time here with me today. Before I let you go, I need to ask this. You're here in Newfoundland now. With that incredible track record, are you seeing anything for improvement around here that you are willing to say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a business out there, whether it's in Canada or the U.S., that can't improve. I mean, here's an example of just the little things that we can do, if you have another minute. At our clinic...
My business partner says we have the whole internet.
Yeah. Like, examples of what we can do. At our hospital in Kaiser, it was a sort of a low-income community. Population 38,000, a lot of apartments. None of the apartments had air conditioning. Probably only 50% of the houses had air conditioning. Coming up to a weekend, probably early in June, and it was going to be blazing hot, like 100+ degrees, 38+ degrees. So we went on our Facebook page and we said, hey, if your pet suffers from heat stress, and many of them do, I said, bring them to the clinic, bring them at 6 o'clock when we close. We've got 40 dog kennels, 20 cat kennels, bring a blanket, bring your favorite toy, and bring their food so it feels like home. And you can drop them off, there's no charge. Pick them up in the morning, take them home, bring it back the next night.
Keep it
wash,
going.
rinse, repeat. So we did that for the entire heat spell. And we had 25,000 hits on our Facebook page. And people were asking us, well, why doesn't my vet clinic do that here? I'm in Southern California, and I saw this, because a friend of mine sent it from Oregon.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. But I said, probably because heat is rarer here, and it's probably more common there, so your pet will be there 100% of the time. But the cost to us was minimal. And the value, as they say, is priceless. So we did the same on the 4th of July. Americans like to start their fireworks 4 days before the 4th of July and end them sometime around the 8th of July. But for dogs, that's, a lot of dogs are very traumatized by that. So we did the same thing. Drop your pets off starting, I think it was July 1st until the 8th, and they could come in every night. And we had a boom box there on an endless Enya loop. So poor dogs and cats listened to Enya the entire time. But again, 28,000 hits on our Facebook page, and cost to me next to nothing. I would come in, 10 o'clock, checking everybody, see everybody's okay, everybody's got water and food. Go home, they'd pick them up the next morning, and they do the same thing, because fireworks, mostly a nighttime thing. And again, just the amount of benefit to the clinic and the good PR was priceless. So, can businesses here do it? Absolutely. I don't think there's even big businesses. In big business like leadership, leadership is about doing things that help somebody else. And I don't think, you talked about a mentor that you had. We don't have enough mentors in big business, let alone small business, because we're not trained to do that. We're trained to do a specific skill. And, if you're an accountant, a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, that's what you do. You're not trained to manage people. And, even in MBA school, we're not really trained to manage people. We're trained to, look at spreadsheets and understand financials and make decisions, but we're not trained to manage people. And that, I think, every business can do a lot better job at. And that's not a criticism of them. It's universal.
John, we've been involved with probably 2,000 interviews, and I got to tell you, I've enjoyed this more than all of those combined. What I find interesting is that you've chosen to come back to Newfoundland, the land of your mom and dad. Let me ask you this: a lot of people watch what we do. Are you open to, like, at this stage of your life? You don't need to prove anything, but what is it you want to do to help the community you're in right now? You already helped my son immensely because he came out of that and said, "Dad, you got to meet this guy." What is it you want to do going forward?
Well, I would probably just like to share some of my insights with small business, large business, help them out, because there's that outside perspective. And that's what happened at Motorola. There were some super bright guys trying to solve their problems, and it just took an outsider to say, "Have you tried that?" And they had been looking at the same problem for so long, they became blind to it. It's the same old, the trees in the forest. And they couldn't see the trees for the forest. And I, immediately started to pick out the trees. And every business can use that. I don't think, I worked, for a year when I was in Ottawa going to graduate school in the restaurant industry. And it's like every industry can use a hand, come up with better ideas. Part of the problem we have in Canada right now, and I guess, everywhere, is people. We don't have enough people. But if you provide good leadership, you can get more from the people you have, as long as you give them the autonomy to do the job, give them the skill set to be able to provide mastery for the job, and then, a little bit of respect and leadership to move them along. Because, I say that, the most opportunities are in the toughest times. And, I think we're in not the toughest of times, but tougher times with labor. But, chance comes for those that are prepared.
Yeah.
And, I always say to people, do what others won't do today so that you can do what they can't do tomorrow. So get your skill set. For your son, get a skill set. Continuously work on that skill set. Pick the tough jobs. Make the tough jobs look easy. The world is your oyster. And that is the truth in business too. If you do those things, you will succeed. I've been there, done that. And it works universally in tough businesses. I work with, when I was at Motorola, it was a Fortune 100 company. And here's some kid from a small town in Montreal that, goes in there and just, rips it. And it's like, I'm not the smartest guy in the pack, but I realize, okay, you got to do a few things. You got to focus on a few skill sets. Get those skill sets, and, you start looking smarter, like you're smarter than the rest. You really aren't.
No.
But you're focused.
It's certainly about people, though, isn't it?
All about
in your
people.
entire career, it's all been about people.
People and processes.
Yeah.
People and processes.
Well, folks, John Maddigan, wow, what an incredible career. And we are lucky enough to have him living right here in Newfoundland and Labrador, which is a province that's on the cusp of some of its greatest economic resurgence in history. So hopefully John can help the premier or something, Who knows where this will take
Who knows where it'll go.
Thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.